Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Arvind, head of Citi Ventures. Arvind, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Thanks for having me, Nicola. I think you and I were speaking earlier, there's not one path. And in my case, I used to be at an institutional venture firm called Menlo Ventures. Just to start at the beginning, I have a technical background. I went to school to do electrical engineering. I became a semiconductor guy. And then I came to the United States to do grad school and then came to work at Intel as a chip designer. The first 2 years, I was a chip designer working on mobile Pentium products. And then after about 2 years, I moved over to program management. So I was the guy trying to launch new products. And in this case, these were mobile Pentium 2 chips for laptops. And I did that for about 2.5 years. I was there between 1995 and 1999. And then subsequently, I went to business school. And after business school, I ended up thinking about going into venture capital. There was always that entrepreneurial bug in me, but I was also very curious about venture. So I ended up going to one of the older firms in Silicon Valley called Menlo Ventures. Menlo was started in 1976. And I went there because I really liked the people. Really smart people, but also a very collegial environment. And I felt like I would learn a lot. Yeah. So I was there for 9.5 years. I was a partner in 2 funds. And then about the 2010 timeframe is when Citi was looking to beef up its corporate venture program. And it was also the time when Menlo was rolling off of Fund 10 and going into Fund 11. So I decided it was a good time to be leaving Menlo. And what excited me about Citi Ventures at that point in time were a few things. One is this intersection of financial services and technology. I had always been interested in it. I'd made a few investments in it, even in my prior life at Menlo. Menlo itself had some experience in the world of fintech, though it was not called that at that point in time. And I just felt that the back end, the reporting, analytics, all the servers and compute and everything that banks run, banks were always early adopters of technology, especially for the back end. Every enterprise company we used to invest in would really care about their financial services customers because they tend to be the largest customers. But now it was clear with sort of the web 1.0 of online banking and such, that even the front end was going to be very important for financial services. And so because of that, I was excited about the opportunity. The dynamics of being at a venture capital firm versus being at a large corporate like Citi. At that point in time, I thought Citi can be a very attractive platform for startups. If you're at Menlo or if you're at any one of those top tier firms and you're trying to lead a Series A or to lead a Series B, typically there's one lead for a round. And it's a competitive market and you win your share of great companies, great investments, and it's good. I felt like from a corporate angle, you can actually get even better access to the best companies out there. You won't have the same ownership, presumably, but I really was excited about working with the best companies. I was excited about financial services. The word fintech was not broadly applied back then. And so I decided to come to Citi because I thought that the value proposition was different, right? So anyway, that's how I came to Citi Ventures and got started in the position that I'm right now.
I have so many questions, but I'll start with the education because it's earlier. But it's also a very nice mix because you have an engineering background and then you went to a business school. How much of that blend or that mix is helping you today?
It's a great question, Nicola, and I sometimes think about it. I have kids and I talk to them about it as well. For the kind of work that we do, you don't necessarily need that deep technical background that I have. I think the way it helps me is, having been in the industry for a little while, the technology changes are very easy for me to understand. Whether it's AI today or whether it was APIs a few years ago or whether it's cloud compute or whatever else it is, those kinds of things are very easy for me to understand. But I think in the world that we live in today, you don't need an engineering background to be successful in venture, and some of the best venture capitalists were not engineers. I think it's just a different skill set to learn how to learn quickly.
Yep.
and to get smart about new areas quickly, to understand what's important, what's not important, so that in the long run, I think venture is a somewhat generalist business, right? You can't be super focused on a narrow area because every technology has some sort of an S curve. So what do you do when you get to that flatter part of the S curve? So just from a career standpoint, I encourage even people on the team to be more generalist. When I first started at Menlo, I started to make semiconductor investments. And then after a few years, semiconductor investments and fabless semiconductor companies became hard to do because of mass cost, because of many other challenges. And so that's when I started to move into enterprise infrastructure, software, storage, things of that nature. And then I started to move up the stack, if you will. And so having that agility to be able to move into new areas is an important skill in venture.
Actually, the keyword is agility. How do you get to the bottom of the S curve before it's too obvious?
Right.
I also like and I think it's a golden nugget, which is asking the how. Because as you probably go through these questions, you get to understand how the entrepreneur is thinking about it.
That's right. And in asking those questions, I've had entrepreneurs that you think have a great technical background, but who struggle to explain why something works, how something works, not being able to put it in terms that I'm able to understand. And when that happens, you always wonder about the technology underpinnings of a particular startup. I think the best entrepreneurs, I feel like, are able to explain it in a very simple way, no matter how complicated the subject matter is. That synthesis and being able to present it is a very important skill. And one of the things I learned very early on in my venture career is how entrepreneurship, and especially the CEO's job, is a 24/7 sales job. In the early days, you're trying to convince co-founders to come and work with you. Then you're trying to convince like top-tier employees to come and work with you. I mean, this is now the old days, so I'm dating myself, but trying to convince landlords to lease you space as a small company, and of course, investors and customers and all the rest. So it's a 360-degree sales job.
So actually, I want to double click. You've seen so many entrepreneurs and you've seen them maybe not doing a good storytelling and some doing well, but have you seen some where you can actually coach them to become better at storytelling? Because the coachability of the entrepreneur actually matters for an investor.
Yep, we have. So when it's an early stage startup, by definition, things are a little more amorphous. They're not completely clear. The value proposition of the product, the maturity of the go-to-market, and being able to get to product market fit. They're on that journey. And as they get closer to getting to product market fit, their ability to articulate and tell that story gets better and better. That's natural, right?
Sure.
So that happens. But I think the specific question you were asking is, are there instances where we have coached entrepreneurs to tell the story better? Absolutely. When you're an early stage board member, one of the things that you can help a startup with is help them raise their next round and then the round after that. And so typically starts off with, hey, come and pitch it to us, and then we'll help you tell the story better. We'll give you feedback. That's very much a part of the value-added services that early stage venture investors provide to their entrepreneurs.
That's another golden nugget. And that's also what we do is we say, for the next round of funding, come and pitch to us. We're as friendly as possible. We're already invested and we're going to give you feedback.
That's right. Yep.
So I want to now move forward to your experience of a financial VC, and it's indeed a really good VC. How much of that financial VC background, which is so different from corporate VCs in some ways and so similar in others, how much of that is shaping how you think today?
I think when I first came from Menlo to Citi Ventures, it was a very different environment. And to some extent, I didn't know how different it was going to be, right?
You thought it was the same.
I didn't think it was the same. I knew it would be different, but I didn't expect it to be that different. And so what I relied on is just the aspect of bringing experience in venture capital. So one aspect of it I was very comfortable with, which is sourcing companies, meeting companies, evaluating them, doing due diligence, and building a portfolio. That aspect of it I had learned through my years at Menlo, and I brought those skills and experience to Citi. So that's obviously one half of the story. The other half of the story is, how do you operate within a large financial institution and as a strategic?
Yep.
The other thing we had to do, even at a very tactical level, is establish a investment process for how to make these investments within a large financial institution, which obviously is regulated. And so we have additional responsibilities compared to even a regular corporate VC. So we started to do all of that. And I was lucky in the sense of being in an environment within Citi Ventures where I had help around me, right?
And before this interview, we talked about the importance of team building, of people. Do you have any tips for the audience, people who are thinking about starting a corporate VC or who are very early in the journey, how to think about team building?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building a team is actually probably, as the leader of a corporate venture unit, one of the things that I think about a lot. At Citi, we started with people who had some experience in venture, both the more senior people as well as the more junior people coming in. They have experienced an interest in venture, if not actually have some venture experience, depending on their level of seniority. We were looking for people who really wanted to make a career as venture capitalists. And that is true to this day, right? We've also started to work with people internally who are interested in venture capital, who have demonstrated that curiosity, who have that innate interest in coming into the VC world. And so we want to bring those people in and get them to be investors as well. I mean, that's still a bit of a harder task to do, but we want to do that. But it's not easy in the sense that in a corporate VC unit, when people learn, they also end up leaving. I think I've been lucky that the senior leadership has been very stable, but the younger people, sometimes they get great opportunities and they've gone on to build careers, and we, stay close to them, make investments sometimes jointly, and so on and so forth. But that has been quite fulfilling to see people come and develop and become investors and really rise up the ranks.
And continue to contribute.
Exactly.
Very nice. Now, one of the challenges you mentioned earlier is the strategic value you're supposed to bring. Very hard to track, very hard to measure. How do you see the journey of you building Citi Ventures? And over time, the strategic value start to become probably more and more tangible. How did you manage at the beginning, and how are you doing it today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are tangible and intangible aspects of that strategic impact story. So there are certain things that we can measure and that we are able to report out on. For example, we have a process called commercialization. So one of those key performance indicators for us every year is how many of our companies have entered a pilot or evaluation phase with Citi, whether it's a business unit or a functional group, etc. Second is how many of them actually closed a commercial deal with Citi. That's the sort of the end goal as far as that is concerned, to be onboarded as a vendor, to be onboarded as a partner, to actually be in business with Citi. And so we track an entire pipeline. Companies that are new, maybe where there's no engagement going on, all the way to companies that have signed commercial deals and in deployment. That pipeline we track very regularly, we report out on, and we get measured on that. Then the second aspect of it is, how are these commercial deals actually doing? How are they helping Citi? There, in certain cases, we can measure the dollars and cents benefit, but overall, it's still quite hard, right? So we end up looking at, for example, we look at expansion. Are they serving just one business unit, or are they serving multiple business units? Are they in one geography, or are they global? So we look at those aspects of it. Finally, we also look at examples and case studies, right? So we do case studies of companies that we have partnered with. What's the use case? Why did they come in? How is it working right now? How did it grow? And in many cases, diving into some of the details and understanding the story is almost as important as understanding the overall measurable KPIs, right?
I think one of the golden nuggets is understanding both the tangible and intangible, but you need that storytelling, that communication part. How do you build goodwill with the business units? How do you make sure that, I'm sure you have many, and through geographies, how do you make sure that you work with the one that need it the most and the one that may not need, or they need it, but they may not know you can provide that capacities?
It's a great question. I think in a company with a diverse set of businesses and functions, there are always businesses that are more lean forward and they want to engage with you versus others. The approach that we take in the early days of Citi Ventures, we had to do a bit of evangelical work. We had to convince people that this kind of fintech disruption and innovation was happening in the startup ecosystem. Nowadays, people understand what's happening in the fintech world and in the startup ecosystem. They understand its importance. Then the question is making it more specific and making it more tangible to the business unit leaders, saying, these are some of the things that we can bring in that can help your business. I think the best way to build credibility is by putting up proof points, right? Bringing a company that ends up solving a real problem for them. When we do, that's how you kind of build that credibility over time, is by saying, hey, Citi Ventures has been able to bring some of these interesting vendors to us that's helped us solve problems. So that's sort of how you do that. Secondly, collaboration and how you collaborate with business units is very important. Each of these business units is a company of its own and it has its own culture. So you have to tweak the engagement model based on the structure of the organization. The other reality of large companies is sometimes there are reorgs and changes. And so then tracking those changes so that you can then re-engage with the new leadership. So all of those kinds of things are things that we have learned over time.
We talked a lot about the value you bring to Citi. Let's talk about how you bring value to the entrepreneurs and the portfolio companies. How do you bring that superpower in a way that Citi is giving you?
Because the way we think about it is about having a different value proposition to entrepreneurs compared to traditional VCs. The first thing that we try to do is we come from a place where we sort of understand how startups work. We understand the pace at which things move. We try to fit in with the rest of the syndicate as far as the financial aspect of it is concerned and move quickly. So we try to be quick there. We try to align incentives and make it easier for them to work with us. That's at this point kind of table stakes, right? You need to be able to do that. Now, beyond that, I think it's really experience that some of us bring from traditional VC and being a value-added investor. That ethos is what we bring as well. First, we become the champion of the entrepreneur inside of Citi. So they know that they have somebody within the Citi ecosystem that's speaking for them internally. And then secondly, just understanding how startups work and how you add values. So we started something called a platform function. Here we try to connect these entrepreneurs and companies to other companies in our network. The who's who of Global 2000 companies are clients of ours. So where possible, we use those connections to make introductions for our companies. Because in many cases, these other large companies are maybe interested in the same kinds of things we're interested in. We organize events and connect these startup companies not only with Citi folks, but we also connect them with other external folks who are in those spaces.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about the platform function. How do you recruit the right people to be in the platform function?
We've started small. So it's not a large team. And when I say platform function, it's one person who's kind of the lead plus other investors who are involved. And the platform function is very dependent on who you are as a VC. So what are some of the things that we can provide a startup in terms of value add relative to the other VCs that they may have around the table? And in our case, that means we're not going to be able to help them with, let's say, recruiting. We're not going to be able to help them with design, but we can help them with some of these connections. We can help them with events. We can help them promote their company as well as their product or services when in an appropriate way in the right kind of forums. Even with Citi, our Citi internal partners can take additional time to spend time with them, explain what it takes to work in a larger environment. And many times the startups learn a lot about that just from talking to us, from talking to other internal business partners. So it's in a variety of those ways that we try to add value over and above what might be a commercial relationship.
And if I think about your experience as a financial VC, one of the value add is, of course, leading around, building a syndicate, being on the board. How did you bring this into Citi Ventures, and has that changed over time?
For the majority of the situations, we're board observers, or we just have access to the management team. We get information rights and so on and so forth because we may be participating investors in a round, not the lead investors in a round. I think it goes back to my earlier comments, Nicola, about the type of people we try to recruit. And we mentor them internally, even the more junior folks, we mentor them internally on how to work with companies, what to look out for when in that engagement, how to support companies with follow-on rounds, how to support companies with advice. So we sometimes are looking at members of our team on how they've been able to add value to these companies, not just on the Citi side, but even outside of Citi. And then we get great comments from startup CEOs. You meet them at a conference and they're saying, hey, XYZ on your team has been extremely helpful to us and so on. So we want to hear those kinds of comments. So I think with respect to board membership and syndicate, where we have board memberships, where we have that kind of relationship with the company, we're able to do it. We are able to, for example, sometimes preempt rounds if it makes sense. We're able to bring other investors along in the syndicate. But that's a minority of the time. The majority of the time, we're more participating investors.
And you talk about mentoring. You're mentoring mentors to entrepreneurs. Any tips about how to do it well?
I think the only thing I can think about and the only way we have sort of know how to do is by essentially having more junior folks work with the more senior folks and watching that interaction.
Tag team.
When I first started in venture capital, I was an associate and I tag teamed 2 or 3 different partners to different board meetings. So not only did I learn how to interact with portfolio company management, the other board members, but I also learned that style from multiple board members and multiple partners of mine. And then, of course, you end up picking your own style. So you actually, over time, learn where you tend to dig in and how you can help companies versus where other people may be stronger.
Now, one thing you mentioned is you've managed to make Citi Ventures fast enough, table stake. How did you do it? Because some corporate VCs are slow, and it's not because they want to be slow. No one wants to be slow, but they have to go through some of the steps inside the mothership. How did you manage?
I'd say the very first thing when we first got started and I came on board at Citi Ventures is to really map out the investment process very clearly and saying, this is kind of how this ought to work. Now, since that time, our risk and control and governance requirements have increased. So we've obviously reacted to that and made sure that we put the appropriate processes in place. But the other thing that we did, and we've been very lucky that we've had internal business partners who've understood it. They very quickly came on board. This is where some of the prior experience in venture coming from a financial VC, not just me, but even other people on the team, that brought that credibility. And so they were able to hear that from us on how these things matter, what matters, what doesn't matter. The other aspect of it is, of course, working with our business partners, right? Here, because of our model where some percentage of the companies that we invest in fact, the majority of the companies we invest in fact, we may be investing ahead of the business. And so we're able to make those decisions a little bit quicker and move forward. And then there are others where the business is very interested. And so we're sort of tag teaming with the business to land not just a commercial deal, but also an investment deal. But since we have that ability to sometimes invest ahead of the business, that enables us to move a bit faster as well.
So I'll double click on this because ahead of the business potentially means you can invest very early stage when the innovation is still fragile but emerging. How have you thought about early stage versus later stage? Early stage is very good for scouting, but late stage is very good for direct connection and engagement. So how do you think about this too?
That's right. When I say ahead of the business, it's actually a point of view of whether something is aligned with current business strategy. Is that something that the business is paying attention to today? Or is that something that we think might be important for the business a little bit further down the line? So it's a bit of an orthogonal dimension than the stage of the company itself, right? So a company could be a somewhat later stage company, but it's maybe still a little further out for our business, just given where things stand today. Or it could be an early stage company, but it could be very aligned with the business and it could be very aligned with our priorities currently. Stage-wise, we've tended to take a stage agnostic approach. We invest in companies that are sometimes early, sometimes late, and everything in between. We try not to do pre-product companies. So we mainly do post-product companies only because it's faster to be able to trial, evaluate it, and to actually do a commercial deal. That way we're not going through the very early product building phase, product maturity phase. We're trying to get to companies where the product is there, it's mature, even though they may not have a lot of revenue, they're ready to actually come in and work with Citi on that.
And for the entrepreneurs who are going to watch this interview, what are you interested or excited to invest next? That would be my last question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're currently thinking about 3 areas perhaps I would highlight. One is in the area of wealth. We think that the fintech revolution has come to wealth. We've focused on wealth for the last 18 months to 2 years. Second area that I think about, and it's a broader area, is this area of embedded fintech. Financial services, whether it's payments, lending, could be FX hedging or whatever else, being embedded wherever you are doing business, wherever the customers are doing business. I think that's very powerful because you can actually make it extremely seamless. Last but not least is AI and Gen AI. Obviously a very important topic for the world today, but a very important topic for financial services. We've been investing in AI, data and AI companies for a little while. And obviously we're now digging into the Gen AI world as well.
Like many people.
And like many people, we're no different in that way.
Arvind, thank you so much for sharing very openly and candidly your journey and all the learnings along the way. Thank you.
Nicola, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.